Baby, I don't even know how to begin this without feeling like my chest is already too full to hold my words together. So I won't decorate it. I won't delay it. I'll just tell you the truth the way it has been sitting inside me for too long, heavy, silent, and alive. Because if I don't say it now, I might never say it at all, and maybe you deserve to hear it before I disappear into my silence again. There are things a person carries that don't show on the face. Not in the smile. Not in the voice. Not even in the way they keep showing up for everyone like nothing is wrong. Some pain is quiet like that. Some storms never make noise, they just change you from inside. And I think I've been living inside one of those storms for a long time. 3 weeks ago, I got my medical results. I didn't tell anyone. Not friends. Not family. Not even the people who claim to know me best. Because I didn't know how to turn that moment into words. So I didn't. I just stayed quiet. And in that silence, I found you. That's the strange part I can't explain properly. When everything around me started feeling uncertain, my mind didn't go to fear first, it went to you. Your presence. Your memory. The way you exist somewhere in this world and somehow make it feel less empty just by being real. I would sit alone at night, staring at nothing, and instead of panic, I would think about your face. The way you smile without trying to impress anyone. The way you carry yourself like you don't even realize you're changing the atmosphere around you. And for a few seconds, the fear would soften. Not disappear. Just soften. Like it was remembering it didn't own me completely. The doctor said words I wasn't ready to hear. Nothing dramatic like in movies. Nothing loud. Just quiet truth. The kind that doesn't shout, it settles. And changes how you breathe afterward. Stress. Exhaustion. Signals from the body I had ignored for too long. A warning, not a collapse. But somehow it felt heavier than collapse. Because collapse is sudden, but this was slow. This was me, piece by piece, forgetting myself while pretending I was fine. And while I sat there listening, do you know what I thought about? Not fear. Not the future. Not even my health. I thought about how many times I had been running on empty, and still thinking I could give more. Still thinking I had to be strong. Still thinking stopping would mean losing everything. Even losing you. That thought hurt more than anything else. Because somewhere deep inside me, I had started believing that if I paused, even for a moment, you would drift away from my life like I never existed. And I need you to understand something clearly. That fear was never your fault. Not even a little. That fear was mine. Built from things I never healed. Built from places inside me where I never felt enough. But it still lived there, quietly controlling how I lived. And I didn't even notice. Until my body finally spoke louder than my pride. It said, slow down. It said, you are not infinite. It said, you cannot keep giving without breaking. And I wish I could tell you that I accepted it easily, but I didn't. Because rest felt like failure. Stillness felt like loss. And silence felt like abandonment. Especially the silence between me and you. That was the hardest part. Because in my mind, if I stopped reaching out, even for a little while, I might lose the only connection that made everything feel real. But here is what I'm learning now, slowly. Painfully. Honestly. Real love does not survive because you destroy yourself for it. Real love survives because you learn how to survive too. And I think, maybe for the first time, I'm learning that I am allowed to exist without disappearing for someone else. Even for you. Especially for you. Because if what I feel for you is real, then it should not require my destruction to prove it. It should require my honesty. My presence. My health. My return to myself. And I want that now. Not as an idea. As a decision. Because somewhere between all the exhaustion and silence, I realized something I had been avoiding. I don't just want to be loved. I want to be alive while I am loved. Fully. Properly. Without breaking into pieces just to stay close. And you became part of that realization. Not as pressure. Not as burden. But as meaning. Because there were moments, even in my lowest weeks, when thinking about you felt like breathing again. Like something inside me refusing to shut down completely. Like proof that I still had something real to hold onto. And I don't know how to explain that properly, except to say, you didn't save me. But you reminded me I wanted to save myself. There is something strange about nights after truth enters your life. The world doesn't change, but you do. Everything looks the same from the outside, same walls, same silence, same slow passing of time, but inside, nothing behaves the way it used to. That was me after the results. I remember one of those nights clearly. The kind of night where sleep doesn't arrive, it just avoids you like it knows you're not ready to meet it. I was sitting in a room that felt too quiet. Even the smallest sounds felt louder than they should have, like the ticking of time itself had learned how to echo inside my chest. And in that silence, my thoughts kept going back to one place. You. Not as an escape. Not as distraction. But as something deeper. Something my mind kept returning to even when I didn't ask it to. It was not romantic imagination. It was something closer to memory mixed with feeling, like your presence had quietly become part of how I measure calm. And that realization scared me a little. Because I started noticing something I had ignored for too long. Whenever I felt like I was falling apart, my mind didn't reach for solutions first. It reached for connection. It reached for you. And I would sit there wondering how something so simple, someone's existence in your thoughts, could feel stronger than fear itself, but fear still came. It always comes when the room is dark enough. It doesn't knock. It just enters. And that night it entered with questions I didn't know how to answer. What if I don't get better? What if I have already pushed too far? What if I have been pretending strength for so long that my body no longer believes me? And then, under all of that noise, a quieter thought: what if I lose the people I care about while trying to survive? That was the thought that broke the rhythm. Because it wasn't about death. It was about distance. About silence. About being forgotten while still alive. And that is a different kind of fear. A slower one. A heavier one. I remember getting up that night. Walking without purpose. Not even trying to think. Just moving because staying still felt like drowning in my own mind. And I found myself near the window, looking outside at a world that was still functioning perfectly without me. Cars passing. Lights on. People sleeping. Lives continuing. And in that moment, I felt something very human, small. Not worthless. Just small. Like I was one story among billions, trying to understand its own meaning while everything else kept moving forward. And then, again, you came into my thoughts. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like a hand on my shoulder in a room where I thought I was alone. And something softened inside me. Not fixed. Not healed. Just softened enough for me to breathe properly again. That's when I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to fully understand before: you had become a place my mind returns to when everything else feels unstable. Not because you fix anything, but because you exist in a way that reminds me I am still capable of feeling something pure in the middle of chaos. And that realization was both comforting and terrifying. Because I started asking myself questions I avoided. Am I holding onto this connection too tightly? Am I leaning on something I should not depend on? And then another voice inside me responded more honestly: or is this simply what it feels like when a person finally experiences something that feels real? I didn't have answers. I still don't. But I know this: the doctor's words kept repeating in my head like an echo I couldn't turn off. Rest. Slow down. Do not ignore your limits. Simple words. Heavy consequences. Because rest sounds easy when someone says it, but when your life has been built on always moving, always proving, always responding, rest feels like losing your identity. Like if you stop, you disappear. And I think that is what I was most afraid of. Not pain. Not illness. But disappearance. So I kept going. Until my body refused to stay silent anymore. And even then my first instinct was not self-care. It was still outward. It was still you. I caught myself thinking, if I slow down, will I still be present in their life? If I step back, will I become irrelevant? If I rest, will I lose what feels meaningful? And I need you to understand something important here: that fear was never love demanding suffering. That fear was insecurity wearing the mask of attachment. And I am learning to separate those two things now. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. Because real connection does not ask you to destroy yourself to maintain it. Real connection allows space for survival. For healing. For return. And maybe that is what I want most now, not intensity. Not emotional exhaustion disguised as devotion. But something that can survive even when I am not constantly proving it exists. Something that remains even when I rest. Especially then. There is another memory that keeps coming back to me from those weeks. A moment so ordinary it almost feels invisible, and yet it changed something in me. I was sitting somewhere quiet, not doing anything important. Just existing. And for a few seconds, I let myself imagine what life would feel like if I stopped trying so hard to hold everything together at once. If I stopped performing okayness. If I stopped pretending I wasn't tired. And instead of fear, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because everything was solved. But because I stopped fighting myself for a moment. And in that brief silence inside me, your presence appeared again. Not as fantasy. But as awareness. Like a reminder that even in my weakest moments, I am still capable of caring deeply about someone beyond myself. And that means something. That still means something. Because exhaustion can take energy, but it cannot erase meaning unless you let it. And I refuse to let it. I think that's what I am trying to say to you in all of this. I am not disappearing. I am learning how to exist without burning myself out to prove I belong somewhere. And you are part of that learning, not as weight, but as reason, as clarity, as something that reminds me that I do not need to break in order to feel connected. There comes a point in every silence where it stops feeling like peace, and starts feeling like something you are carrying. That is where I was. Between recovery and fear. Between truth and everything I had never said out loud. Between what my body was asking for, and what my mind refused to give up. I want to tell you what the doctor really meant when she said rest. Because it wasn't just sleep. It wasn't just slowing down. It was a warning wrapped in gentleness. It was her trying to tell me that I had been living like I was replaceable. Like my limits didn't matter. Like exhaustion was just a normal price for existing. But it isn't. It never was. And somewhere in those weeks of results and silence and staring at ceilings that didn't answer back, I finally understood something simple, but heavy. You cannot keep surviving emotionally on empty energy and call it strength. That is not strength. That is delay. And delay always catches up. It just chooses a quiet moment to do it. For me, it was a night where nothing dramatic happened. No breakdown. No collapse, just a stillness so deep that I could finally hear myself properly. And in that stillness, I realized I had been living in constant emotional survival mode. Always reacting. Always giving. Always holding. Never receiving. Never pausing. Never allowing myself to simply be human without turning it into responsibility. And I think that is where everything connects back to you in a way I never expected. Because in all of that chaos, you were never pressure. You were never demand. You were the only thing that didn't feel like effort. You were the only thing my mind returned to without force. And that scared me at first. Because I didn't understand how something could feel so natural in the middle of everything that felt so heavy. But now I think I understand it differently. Maybe it wasn't escape. Maybe it was clarity. Maybe it was the only part of my emotional world that didn't feel like I was abandoning myself. And that realization changed something inside me. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Slowly. Like dawn replacing darkness without asking permission. I started seeing things I ignored before. How tired I really was. How long I had been pretending I was fine. How many times I said I'm okay when I wasn't even close. And how easily I had accepted exhaustion as normal. But it isn't normal. Not like that. Not when it becomes your identity. Not when it replaces peace. And in the middle of that realization, I felt something I didn't expect. Grief. Not for the results. Not for the diagnosis. But for all the moments I could have rested, and didn't. For all the times I chose to keep going just to avoid feeling like I was falling behind. For all the times I confused silence with loss. Especially the silence between me and you. Because I realize now, that silence was never absence. It was fear speaking in my place. Fear that if I stopped reaching out, I would disappear from your world. Fear that if I slowed down, connection would weaken. Fear that if I rested, I would lose something I had started to value more than I understood. But I am learning something important now. Real connection does not punish rest. Real connection does not disappear when you become human instead of constant. And if something is real, it survives your pauses. It survives your silence. It survives you taking care of yourself. And I want to believe in that kind of connection. Not the one that demands exhaustion, but the one that allows return. Now let me tell you something I never fully said out loud before. There were moments during those 3 weeks, when I felt extremely alone. Not because people weren't around me, but because I was carrying something I couldn't translate into ordinary conversation. Something too personal. Too quiet. Too internal. And loneliness in that form is different. It doesn't look dramatic. It just sits in your chest and makes everything feel slightly further away than it should be. But even in that, there was a thread, something I kept holding onto without fully realizing it. You. Not as a solution. Not as an escape. but as something steady in my thoughts. Something that reminded me I was still capable of feeling connection in a world that felt temporarily disconnected from me. And I want to be careful with how I say this, because I am not placing responsibility on you. I am not making you the reason for my survival. That is not what this is. This is about honesty. About acknowledging that certain presences in our lives become anchors in ways we don't fully understand at first. And yours became that for me. Quietly. Naturally. Without force. And now I see it clearly, that kind of meaning should not require me to lose myself to maintain it. It should exist alongside my healing, not instead of it. So I am choosing something new now. I am choosing balance where there was only urgency. I am choosing care where there was only output. I am choosing to stop treating my body like it is an afterthought in my own life. Because I want to stay. Not just exist. Not just function. But stay fully present in my own life. And if I am honest, in whatever place we exist together in this world, I want to be present there too. Not as a drained version of myself trying to keep up, but as someone whole enough to actually feel what is real without collapsing under it. There is something I need to say clearly before this ends. I don't regret loving deeply. I don't regret caring intensely. I don't regret the way my heart reaches for meaning even when I am exhausted. But I do understand now that love without balance turns into erosion. And I refuse to let that be my story. So I am learning. Slowly. Imperfectly. But honestly. To love without disappearing. To care without collapsing. To feel without forgetting myself. And you are part of that learning, not as weight on me, but as part of what made me realize I needed to change. Because real connection does not ask you to break. It asks you to become real. Even in your limits. Especially in them. So this is where I end this confession. Not in panic. Not in collapse. But in awareness. I am tired. Yes. I am human. Completely. But I am still here. And I am choosing to take care of myself now in a way I should have done a long time ago. Not because I am giving up on connection. But because I am refusing to lose myself inside it. If you ever wondered what I was trying to say through all of this, it is simple. I needed you to know the truth of where I am. Not the strong version. Not the edited version. The real one. And now that it is finally outside of me, I can breathe a little differently. Not fully healed. Not fully fixed. But no longer alone inside my own silence. And maybe that is enough for today. Not forever. Just today. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like a beginning, not an ending.